I'm coming in hot. Coming in hot.
Yeah, so Jim Sparkman, one of the owners of HomeSmart Realty Group here in Salem. Business partners Mark Farrow. The real estate business is going well. We've grown. We started the thing in 2013. There were 3 of us. 4 of us if you include a silent kind of investing partner. We through the years we've kind of morphed a little bit, and we have 2 of us that are now in ownership. One of our original partners is still with the company, but kind of chasing some other opportunities in life. We started with the 3 of us, and I think we had a total of 14 people that came over when we first started, and now we're hovering in the mid 300s. So every day is a little bit different in the real estate game, right? But we've been really blessed.
So you were doing real estate before HomeSmart? What led? Because earlier I think you said they were out of. Where did you say they were?
They're out of Scottsdale,
Arizona.
HomeSmart's based out of Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay. How did that happen? Like, did you go and listen to them and you kind of felt like, hey, that seems like the culture, that seems like the model? Like, how did that?
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of a long story. So so my business partners and I were all at another company here in town doing real estate. And I think we all just kind of got to a point where we're like, gosh, there's got to be something different. The whole adage of paying a commission split and giving so much money to an organization that doesn't really, there's not a lot there that you get for your money. So there's got to be a way for all the hard work that you do to be able to keep some more of that money that you can reinvest in your clients, that you can reinvest in your business, work-life balance stuff, right? So another guy and I here in town kind of went down the track with another real estate company, which ultimately, we got to the end and they offered it to us, and we just went, gosh, this really isn't our jam. Through some conversation, I heard about HomeSmart. And so I flew down to Scottsdale, met with the founder and some of the executive team. And I knew pretty quickly, probably within the first hour, that this was kind of the organization that I wanted to be associated with.
Okay.
So flew back, kind of with that in mind, and met with a couple other guys that ultimately became partners, and we just said, hey, let's make a jump at this. Let's run with this.
Was there any other HomeSmart footprint in Oregon at the time? Or how does that work?
Yes, there was. There was a franchisee in Bend, but it was she had a really small franchise, and really she only ran her team. So there wasn't really any franchise to speak of in Oregon. And part of our deal when we started this thing is that we wanted the franchise rights for the state. So if we were going to jump in, we were going to go big with this. And so ultimately that's what we ended up with, was the franchise rights to the state of Oregon.
Meaning you can open up other or franchise other offices throughout the state of Oregon.
Yeah, so we have the franchise in Oregon, but we can open branch offices anywhere in the state that we want.
And that will still fall underneath you guys
That'll still be our franchise, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so ultimately the goal is to have, a branch office, I think, in any major city in the state. Right now we're in the Portland metro market, so we have an office in Tigard, we have an office in Corvallis, we have some team offices that are spread throughout the Mid-Willamette Valley, and then we're headquartered in Salem. That's kind of our head office.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, earlier it sounds like you're still looking to grow a little bit.
We're always looking to grow. Yeah, we want to grow. Yeah, no reason to be small.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not small anymore.
You're right.
What has that growth been like to, in the last 5 years, like, has it been like the last couple years where it just exploded? Has it been kind of the same incremental growth each year? I know for me being in this community, it does seem like the last couple of years, I'm like, I see HomeSmart agents everywhere.
Right.
But maybe that wasn't really how it.
Well, I'd say in the first couple years, I mean, we had a space over off a commercial that we grew out of by about year 3, let's call it. We were kind of busting at the seams. So we went from 13 agents, 14 agents to, pushing 200 in the first few years.
Okay.
So we kind of made some incremental growth, right? I think we went from like 13, around the 75 agent number, really in the first year, maybe 18 months. And then we went from 75 up to like 150 and then into 200, that 200 number. I don't know right off the top of my head, but we were in that number. And we were in a really small space, right? So under 1,600 feet. Agents just kind of popped in to do their business. And when we had events and, pick up checks and things like that.
Yeah.
But we knew that we were going to kind of have to make a step, really to kind of take it to the next level. And so that's where we found our new space and dove in the tenant improvements and remodeled that thing.
Was there a building already there on top of the hill?
There was.
Okay, you guys just redid it?
It was pretty dilapidated.
Okay.
It was run down. I mean, a business was operating out of it, but we pretty much had to gut that thing completely in order to make it what we wanted.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought it was a brand new building because
Right.
it looked like a brand new building.
Yeah,
that's why I was curious if there was something there before.
Yeah, it's got a nice facade that looks new.
Yes.
Everything on the exterior is new. Everything interior wise is completely new. I mean, we had to gut that thing. But,
Gotcha.
I think the growth, there's a lot to learn through growth. There's a lot of ups, a lot of downs. But I think it really kind of goes back to the cultural relationship with those that are part of our company.
Mm-hmm.
And that, just really the family atmosphere, the intimate kind of leadership model that I believe in and my partners believed in. And so that's just kind of, I think what grew the thing more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
We initially thought it was going to be the making more money. And yeah, that's great. That's a foot in the door, but people want to work for an organization that they feel needed and welcome, and that people truly care for them. And so I think we had it on paper that that's what we wanted when we started this thing. But I don't think it really came to fruition until we started to grow, where we began to recognize that relationship is what grows the culture, the relationship with those that call your business home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a clip that I put up recently of Jacob Espinoza, and he was talking about how kind of the retaining employees, usually the effectiveness is not the relationship with that employee and the main person or the second to the main person, but whoever that direct person is. And I know it's a little bit different with real estate and people are kind of their own thing.
Right.
But still, there's got to be some kind of hierarchy in who responds to what and who goes back. And he was just talking about how important that is with whoever they're really dealing with on, whatever daily, weekly occasion, how important that relationship is with people wanting to be there and show and work and do a good job. And
yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess there's a couple things we can talk about with that. I think one of the things, and you and I talked about it earlier, I kind of run on this belief of a 3 to 5 leadership model, right? So we can intimately manage, know, and lead, teach, mentor, and train those that we're in charge of at kind of a 3 to 5 person capacity. Like we're not built to manage hundreds, right? We're built to lead hundreds, but to manage in small numbers and teach others how to manage in small numbers. So intimate leadership by knowing who it is that you have underneath you who works for you or you lead. what's happening with their families, how are their kids, when do high school graduations happen, what's happening in their lives. And I think that intentional relationship is really important at that, because that's how it really grows. So, our business is a little bit different. Yes, we have a staff, and shout out to our staff, because they're phenomenal. They're amazing. And there's daily interactions with them. But really, in our business, where we have 300 plus 1099 or independent contractors, right? 1099 employees.
Yeah.
They really have kind of their own business plan. They have their own way of doing business, but it gives us the opportunity to step in and help them navigate that. But that only happens through trust and relationship. So that's one piece. I think the other aspect is that with our staff, when we're interacting with independent contractors, it makes it that much more important that every interaction we have is meaningful, right? And so if we have to prove a point, or we have to make a correction, that correction needs to be done in such a meaningful way that it's, one, understood and respected, but that, two, it's implemented, right? And so that's kind of the weird dichotomy that we have in our industry with our business.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost actually, the first thing I did out of college, I was a licensed real estate agent.
Okay.
Wish I probably would have just stuck with that. Probably would have been doing quite well by now.
Right.
But when I think about the business model that is real estate, and everyone's kind of, I mean, not kind of, like the agents are, they're 1099. They are independent contractors. They kind of are making their own business within a business. It might even be more important of how you guys are bringing leadership to that, just due to the fact they can say, I think I'm going to hang my license over here. You're not employing me. There's no kind of, I'm just going to go over here. So that might even be more of a challenge for your industry in terms of building and growing and having people trust and want to stay under that umbrella. Because they're not your employee.
Yeah. I think it's it's a continuous struggle, right? And maybe not struggle. That might not be the right word. Challenge. It's a continuous challenge for us, because we've experienced some of the negative, right? We experienced a window where we had, I would call it a mass exodus of folks going to another organization. And how we manage that, I think, one, is important. Did we keep true to our word in how we handled those that left, right? I believe we did. And I would say that our staff believes they did. Two, are we staying above reproach, right? Are we ensuring that we're not talking negatively in the marketplace about those individuals? Are we keeping our ethics and our morals in place in how we handled that? And make no mistake, that was a trying window for us, because that was a large number of folks that migrated. End of the day, do we still think they would be in a better place if they were with us? Absolutely. I do. And I think we do. But how we handled ourselves through that, I think is the more important discussion, because there will always be people that want to be in the real estate business.
Right.
And so did we learn from that?
Yep.
Right. And did we take those lessons and implement, how we're going to handle it in the future?
Yeah. Well, obviously HomeSmart's crushing it because we see you everywhere. But what I always like to talk about even more is your journey and how you got here. And we spoke quite a bit out there, and kind of wherever you want to dive in with your military background, kind of, it seems like there's a lot of crossover in how you're running the real estate business with some of the stuff you've learned, whether it's in the military, faith-based, and how you're running those things. So just go back as far as you want to go and you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's a there's a lot to talk about. I think funny enough, I didn't really have a family business per se to follow a track, right? So, my dad is a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My great uncle was a pastor, right? Kind of traveled the world doing that. Um, but I never felt that was my jam. I felt that I needed to do something different. And ultimately, my first kind of real job was the military, right? I kind of made some poor decisions in high school that kind of affected the track that I really wanted to do, which was baseball. And that kind of led me to go into a recruiter's office and join in the military, right? So, the Army, I think, kind of taught me at an early age, what structure looked like, how to, I guess, follow direction of leadership. And early on, the goal was never to stay in the military. I guess God had a different plan, right?
Yeah.
Because that didn't happen.
Right.
And so that's kind of the first real job, I guess, was in the military.
And that was right out of high school?
Well, I turned 18 in basic training.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was at infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, at 18 years old, right? And so that kind of, fast forward, I ended up getting into construction. My family, my mom's mom was in real estate. Which, by the way, I swore I'd never do. My mom was in real estate again. Swore I'd never do this crazy business that we're in. But my mom's brother was in the masonry business, was a contractor here in town in Salem. And so kind of learned some construction. And so that's kind of what I dove into when I kind of grew up and got into doing something. But I never really liked to work for somebody else. I think that's many entrepreneurs don't. So I got into construction and had a siding business. And that's kind of how, I met my wife when I was doing siding. And that's kind of what I got into was construction. So, I mean, it provided a living. It was an okay living. Worked hard. And at that time in my life, I still played a lot. So, you go to work during the day and you play at night and you do your thing. But, that was kind of my jam at that point. And I did that. And I loved it. I love construction. I love I love the idea of showing up at a job site in the morning and having a project to do, needing to get something accomplished. And at the end of the day, there's a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
There's something you can look back on, whether it be pouring some sidewalk or, hanging siding. I mean, you start kind of with this blank slate. And at the end of the day, when you're rolling all your extension cords up and you're putting everything into the trailer, you can look exactly at what you've accomplished, right? So there's real gratification in that. But I guess in 99, I was in the inactive reserve and I got called from somebody in the Department of the Army and kind of ended up making my way back into the Army Reserve. And so that just kind of set the tone in life for what was going to happen for the next handful of years of our life. September 11th was the next thing that just kind of kicked everything off for us.
So after that, because a few people have been on here and like Joel, what was he doing? He kind of said like he had family member, I think Navy, and he was like, oh, I'll go be something in the Navy. And that'll be kind of chill. Won't see action. He's like, but then September 11th happened and everyone, you're going to go do something.
Right.
What did you go do when that happened?
Yeah. So
what can you discuss?
Well, when I came back into the Army Reserve, I went into psychological operations, PSYOP, right? And so we, September 11th happened and that kind of put some things in motion. So I mean, fast forward, ultimately deployed to Afghanistan to Kosovo and the Balkans, and to Iraq. And so, each one of those, deployments kind of had different things that we were involved in. And, in my opinion, I love the job, the MOS, the psychological operations, just everything that it entails. And so that's my regiment. That's what I enjoy. And I think it's the best job in the Army, quite frankly. And so, yeah, it led to deployments and things like that.
Yeah. We spoke a little bit out there about some of the stuff that you came back with in terms of PTSD and I mean missions that you couldn't talk about. You've referenced there's been some movies made about some of those types of things. I guess however you will speak on that, like what has that been like? Or you referenced your marriage with that. I know Joel referenced some of that. He referenced having an ex with children and some of the stuff with that. Like what, if you will, speak on what that time was like or what you learned or some of the challenges that you might still face today with some of those experiences.
Right. So I guess there's kind of a few things to talk about. So the first thing I'll tell you, I loved deploying in the military. I enjoyed it. There's just something that people don't understand about the feel of a deployment with the military. Being away, kind of, being part of a team, but being on your own and not really having the comforts of home and, everything that you do is really, it determines what is going to happen in your life at that moment. Right. Yeah. And I think there's some value in that. I think the downside to it, obviously, is that you miss what's happening at home. So, a lot of people talk about missing their loved ones, but, that's a real thing. I think almost more importantly is the everyday thing that is being missed, right? You're missing out. While the rest of the world is, doing what they do, you're not. And so you're missing that. I think you referenced the films and stuff, right? So I think, early on, kind of the military was somewhat, it was cliche to talk about things. Like there was no emphasis on talking it out. Right. And so, September 11th was an interesting one for us as a nation, right? Because we had never in the history of the nation, Pearl Harbor was probably the closest, and many would argue that it was probably the most impactful thing that as far as an attack on our nation that's ever happened. But what was interesting about, September 11th is it was in the heart of New York City. It was a new generation. It was something that we as Americans thought that we couldn't be attacked. And somebody somehow got into our nation and caused terror. So I think that set the wheels in motion in how we have discussions about things in the future. Even, if I rewind to 2003, 2004, even 2 years, 3 years into the war in Afghanistan and just barely into the war in Iraq, it was still very guarded on what soldiers should and could, and, airmen and sailors and anybody in the military should or could really talk about. And not until later on when we started to see, films came out and things of that nature. Books were written. There's plenty of information about the war on terror that's out there now that, for previous wars, like ones that our grandfathers served in, and even our maybe uncles and grandfathers, call it Vietnam,
right?
That they never talked about it. It was guarded. They held it inside, which is very unhealthy. right? But I think our generation learned that there's some mental health that really needs to be focused on when it comes to talking it out about what you've experienced. And, our generation deployed probably more um, than most ever have in the history of an American war, right? So, because we really had two fronts happening in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and I can't tell you, in my generation of men and women that deployed, it's not unheard of that somebody's deployed 5 or 6 times in combat, and their 5 or 6 times in combat was over a matter of 6 or 8 years, right? So a lot of ugly had been seen.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, the big piece was getting to a point in my relationship with my wife where, she could say to me, I think you need to probably talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And there were some ugly moments with she and I, where she's a saint, by the way. God bless her. But for her to be able to say to me, you're not right. There's something you've got to do. You've got to talk to somebody that can help you work this out. And not until that point did I really feel that there was a lot of value in that. Kind of once I got through some of that counseling and met with some folks and talked some of the experiences out, it was really, really valuable for me.
Yeah, I can't even. It does seem like those things can be discussed more freely now. But just the idea of, hey, you're going to go over and maybe probably experience the most traumatic thing you'll ever experience in your life, and don't talk about it.
Right.
Like, I've been curious, like, is that a bravado thing? Like why was it a don't talk about the most traumatic thing? Because now it seems like it's accepted. Now It definitely, they're making movies on it. I don't know if that kind of really pushed it out there, but it definitely seems like, hey, this is a real thing. We need to talk about it. Holding it in does nothing positive. It just creates so many things. But I've always been curious, like, in those other generations, like, why was it don't talk about, like, was that just a bravado thing? Just,
right.
You don't need to, or we're tougher than that, or
I don't know. I think societally, if you look at, let's take the generation of World War II, right? I mean, at that time in the world, I mean, there was a stereotypical household, right? Yeah. I mean, we've watched it, gosh, you even watch like reruns of Leave It to Beaver and you go, wow, societally, they're so that doesn't at all look like my household, the way that we, operate. I do think it was a generational thing. I think there might be some bravado associated with that, but I don't know. I think we just have kind of, the generations have evolved a little bit, and where we understand that there's maybe more of a place to be able to talk out challenges and to be able to kind of speak out, I guess, against, not even against, but speak out about some of the struggles and challenges that are out there.
Yeah.
I try not to hang my hat on negative experiences. I try to hang my hat on what I've learned through struggle or through challenges, because you can find bad in pretty much everything. I mean, even really positive, right? I mean, gosh, my family went on an amazing vacation this summer, right, to celebrate my son's graduation.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's at least a dozen instances in that I can point out, like, well, that was dumb, or that I didn't like that, or that didn't go the way we had planned. But I tend to try to focus more on kind of what that positive is. And so I think if we look back on being able to work through some of that through PTSD as a true, it is an issue, right? And especially there's so many negative things happening in the world right now, that there's PTSD associated with it, that traumatic stress. It's just there in the world right now. So, the same thing. I needed to meet with somebody. I needed to talk it out. I needed somebody who was going to look at me and not think I'm less than because I'm experiencing something that, a result of something that I've been through. If that makes sense.
And even that feeling that you had, it's amazing that you would feel that way. Here, you're put in this position to, go try and accomplish some crazy feats, a lot of stuff that you're not even supposed to talk about, crazy traumatic things.
Right.
And then you're the one feeling like, well, I'm not really supposed to share this.
Right.
Like, even the fact that that's what society made you feel like.
Right.
That, is there something wrong with me?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
You were in this crazy experience. Like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Like, that is not norm.
Right.
That is not the norm thing. And yet you felt like, man, I'm not supposed to be sharing this. That's.
I think it's, I feel like I've kind of put my finger on one of, the buttons of it, right? So, because in the military, you've got, your active duty services, right? And then you've got your reserves and you've got your National Guard and you've got, there's some real benefits to service, like like for me, right? So I go to my office and I do my job and I do whatever, but every now and then I throw on a uniform and I go do something with the military. And so there's this weird juggling act between your day-to-day and what you're used to, and then the military, right? And so I think part of that struggle for folks, especially that are what we would call citizen soldiers, folks that, men and women that have real careers or are college students or have something going on in the real world, and then they have to throw on a uniform and they go away for 9, 10, 15, 24 months, whatever the case may be, and experience some real traumatic stuff, and then they come back to the real world. It's like you don't belong in either one of them, I think, is part of the feeling. So how do I turn this light switch off and turn this one on? Right. And so I think we've learned through the years that requires being able to talk it out and navigate that. Because if we don't learn how to navigate it, through talking it out, then we're never going to really understand, how we do it effectively.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting, because I've never experienced the military or whatnot, but you saying like you didn't at times feel like you belonged in either one of those, that's got to be very challenging. Like, you're locking in, like, I got to go do this and perform this. I'm like locked into that mode. And then you're coming back and it's like, okay, I don't got to be like, I'm back here, like now I'm going to do normal civilian stuff.
Right.
That's got to be very challenging, that mental aspect of that.
It is. I think, a good story is like in 2004 during my deployment to Afghanistan, I came home on leave. Well, my wife had given birth to my child. We had closed on a home. And, I came home on leave and I went directly to the hospital, the NICU, where my son was at. And so, like, it was odd. It was odd showing up, where I had been kind of living in my space for, 6 months, let's call it. And then coming back to the real world where now I have this newborn and I didn't even really see his mother through pregnancy. So now we've got this new child. And then when he checks out, we go to this new home I had never stepped foot in. So you kind of walk into this place and you're like, wow, is this really mine? Because I can't get too involved for the next 2 weeks because I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to head back overseas. But at the same time, this is my place. So I want to kind of plant some roots. I want to be involved. I want to do whatever. And the spouses of those, when people deploy, their spouses, they have to do. Like they just have to carry on. And so they do what is best, and they manage a new schedule. They, they do, it's a new normal for them. So when you step foot back into that new normal, it's their new normal, not yours, right? So how do you do that the right way? And yeah, I don't think you can fully prepare somebody for that.
I don't know how you would.
You can't.
I don't know how you would.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't know that I even know how to prepare somebody for that. But my wife's done a really good job through the years. Being kind of a military spouse, where she has some of those discussions with wives and girlfriends and mothers and grandmothers of soldiers that are going to most likely mobilize or deploy. Right, where it's like, hey, here's some of the things you need to prepare for. Life is going to be different, and it's hard to navigate, but here are some of the things that you're going to have to look for and know the signs, right? Yeah.
So you spoke on your son, and a little bit how I heard of you was through my friends at the See You Later Foundation, and with your son having cancer. So if you'll kind of speak on, what we talked about it out there, and now you're part of Darian's Gift, which it sounds like is, I don't really know, a cancer-focused foundation.
Right.
So maybe speak a little bit about your son, Darian's Gift, what it does, what it's done for you and your family.
Yeah.
See You Later Foundation out in McMinnville that I've been a part of, and my parents are best friends with Bob and Carmen, and I love them like a second set of parents. But yeah, a little bit on that.
Yeah. So September 2nd of 2015, we found out that Braden had leukemia. So it was I think we were 2 or 3 days before the 6th grade started. So we were getting ready for 6th grade for his first year in middle school. So his mom, he had started getting some headaches, had like 3 days really of just kind of headaches, constant headaches. And so she just kind of, thank God she had enough, wits about her to just say, something's not totally on. Maybe he's did something to his neck or whatever. So she takes him to our pediatrician, and pediatrician saw some signs. He had what they call petechiae, which are just little red dots that show up on your skin when it comes to a blood disease. And so she, doing just kind of a normal checkup on him, saw those dots. And so she decided to get some labs done. Right there kind of on the spot, she felt that it was not normal, that he might have leukemia. And obviously the results came back. And so we checked in that night to Dornbecker. And so that kind of started the cancer journey for our family. And so he had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a white blood cell disease, right? So acute lymphoblastic leukemia, what happens is the white blood cells, one of them separate and then they multiply. So it just creates too many white blood cells in your system. And so it can kill, no doubt, pretty quickly, if not found early. And so we were pretty lucky that it was found pretty quick by our pediatrician. And so that just kind of started that process, right? Crazy timing. I had just been promoted in the Army, and my business partners and I were pretty new in our business.
Well, I was about to say, you said HomeSmart started in 13 or 14?
13.
Okay.
So we signed our franchise agreement in October of 2013, and then we moved into our office February of 2014. So we had only been
a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were, let's call it 18 months into our business when Braden was diagnosed with leukemia. And it really rocked. I mean, it rocked our household, obviously, but it rocked my business partners. One of our original business partners, Don Sturgeon, quickly put together a fundraising event to shave heads. I mean, it was I couldn't have been more blessed by being around good people with that, and they jumped in right away. But yeah, that whole process started, and that carried on through essentially. I think he rang the bell at the end of his freshman year. Maybe. Yeah, I think he finished his last chemo treatment end of his freshman year, rolling into sophomore year. And so, but that was a pretty long journey.
Yeah.
For him
Yeah.
and our family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you have another kid,
I
right?
do. Yeah, my daughter Riley. She's a sophomore at West Salem High School now. Yeah.
I have a daughter named Riley who is in 7th grade.
Oh wow.
In West Straub. Um, what was that like for your daughter to go through that and watch that and experience that?
I don't know that we fully know yet what that was like. I will tell you her experience. I mean, and we talk a lot about these at different events or things of that nature. That one person's sickness in a household does not only impact the one, but it impacts many.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the ones that impacted the most was Riley. There's a video that is kind of out there from Darian's Gift that they did we did a video prior to one of our golf tournaments, and so Riley and Braden were interviewed. And you could tell, I mean, it was pretty emotional for Riley. Yeah, she was in tears. So the challenge for her is that, okay, so brother is now diagnosed with cancer. So that initial impact of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my brother is there. Then the changes happen, and changes happened in our household. We got to the point to where we had to dual parent role, right? So Kristen would go up to Dornbecker with Braden, and I would stay home with Riley, and I would take her to school, and I would go to work, and then I'd make sure she was shuffled where she needed to be, and Kristen would be up at the hospital with Braden. And so there was a familial separation that had to be dealt with because that happened pretty rapidly. From that first time we got to spend, we really hunkered down at Dornbecker as a family for I'd say, hopefully I'm not wrong, in for 2 weeks really, because we checked in. They started his first round of chemo, gave him chemo night one. Like got after it right away. And then we kind of hunkered down in the hospital for like 2 weeks. And then we were able to go home for the first time. Well, then the real program started, the treatment started, right? So there were windows where he would have to go up once every other week and would be in there for a week, assuming that he could actually break a fever and that he could pass the chemo through a system. They would let him go. But there were multiple times that week drug into 2 weeks, and then he started right away again. So he was sitting, there were times where he was at Dornbecker in the bed for 2.5 or 3 weeks at a time. Wow. And so Riley didn't, have her brother. Mom wasn't around. So it was dad taking her out to dinner, trying to keep things as normal as possible, right? And I didn't do a good job at it. I mean, I'm not mom, right? Normalcy for me is different than it is with having mom at home. And so she got to navigate that. I think the other issue for her, and at some point, hopefully she's able to work through that, was that a lot of focus was put on her brother. And so I really wanted to strive to make sure that she had things and time that she was the focus because all of the focus was on how ill her brother was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was impactful on her, and I'm excited to see what that looks like for her in the future, like when she's, kind of through high school and she's able to use that. I think she handled it quite well. She handled it as good as any sibling probably could. We've really never had trouble with her. You know, and I think she's going to be able to do big things because of her experience through that process with her brother.
Yeah, I'm going to have someone on here. She might not know it, but she's going to do it. Her name's Leslie Banky. I'll also have Bob and Carmen. They're dragging their feet. They are dragging their feet, but they will be on here. But, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about Bob, Carmen, and Leslie. And I don't want to speak for them or share their story, but some of the stuff you were saying definitely was resonating with some of that in terms of the attention. And I mean, the See You Later Foundation was created because of Scotty. And I can't imagine what it's like being that other sibling where all the attention is there. And you're a kid, like you don't have you're not equipped to deal with all that kind of stuff. And I've heard Bob and Carmen talk about what it was like when they went through it, and maybe some stuff they would have done differently, or, they didn't do everything perfectly, but they're still together.
Yeah.
I would say I know where they would probably credit that or why they're still together.
Right.
You guys might be in that same boat. You mentioned some statistics. I think it was 15%, 15%, couples that stay together.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 50% is 50 for families that deal with childhood cancer.
Okay.
I think we were talking like cumulative between families that had deployed multiple times, and then on top of that cancer thing. And the Bankies are amazing. And so they're one of the foundations that were really pivotal for us. They were supportive. We were able to navigate this process. The other one is Darian's Gift that now I sit on the board with, and Chad Montgomery, who you have interviewed previously, is on the board as well. And, there are those moments that you kind of look back on and you go, wow, that moment. That was the moment where clarification happened, or, whoa, there was impact that will never fully be measurable, right? And we had one of those moments, and this was kind of the connection with Darian's Gift, right? So, of course, Braden was sick, and so Craig and Abby King, along with Craig's brother Greg, started Darian's Gift. Their son Darian passed away from cancer.
Okay.
And so their thing was, we want to impact families with those needs that we don't often think about, right? So, inch wide, mile deep kind of thing, bridge filler or bridge builders and gap fillers, right? So gas cards, grocery shopping cards, taking care of families in moments of joy, providing moments of joy. And then one of the big things that we do as an organization is during Christmas time, we get all of the gifts for that child and their siblings, because families don't most of the time have the economics to be able to handle Christmas time. So we want to ensure that child and their siblings their needs are met at Christmas. But so anyhow, Abby King one day came over to hang out at our house, and she used to compete nationally in jump rope. This funny thing, right? It's like we never think of jump rope. It's this oddity.
Nationally.
But yeah, I mean, she was unbelievable at it. But she made just a an emotional connection with my daughter and just wanted to invest in Riley. And so, you know, as a dad, I mean, it makes me emotional to even think about right now, right? Braden had his thing, and it makes, you know, I tear up at stupid commercials now, right? But, you know, that was something for me where Riley, seeing somebody invest personally in her because they knew what she was going through as the sibling of the story, right? And so that's really kind of the one that was the pivotal moment for like me going, okay, this is something when we get through this that I need to be involved in. Like, I can't do it right now. I don't want to, I'm not emotionally stable enough to do this right now. But at the end of all this, this is something I want to be part of, because these are the moments. Yeah. Right? Yeah. These are the moments that change lives through hardship during a hard period of time. Right. Yeah.
If people want to be a part or donate or for Darian's gift, what does that look like? Or how?
Yeah. So obviously they can go to our website, which is dariansgift.org. And our website has opportunities for donations. It talks about our events that are happening through the year. We have a couple that we do. We really have one big one is our golf tournament that we do every July. That's our biggest fundraiser for the year. Yeah. But then there are opportunities. It tells stories of certain kids that have been through the program. It'll give them a snapshot of what some of these families are dealing with and ways to give. And we just went through a rebranding and revamping of our website. So it's finally pretty clean and it's really simple to see. I should caveat by saying our nonprofit, our 501c3 is we only operate in 4 counties, right? So gotcha. Marion, Polkland, and Benton counties. Gotcha. But we do support in one-time gifts families that are outside of those counties. So if there's a need, we can do it, but like a full family sponsorship happens inside our 4 counties.
Gotcha. The golf tournament, can anyone play in that, or that's open to
anybody? Okay. Absolutely. And this year was the biggest year we've had. Okay. It was a great year out at Illahee Country Club is where we do it. So every year we're getting bigger, and we had a packed house, and it was a really good year for fundraising. And it's going to support a lot of families this year. Yeah.
Who won that golf tournament?
Of course you throw out. Yeah. So let's start by saying Jeff Dunn, and I'm sure he's going to listen to this. Jeff Dunn. But what was cool this year for Jeff is that my son now plays golf at Corbin University. And so Braden and Jeff got to play together, and then Braden invited a couple of his friends, and then one young man reached out to me he's one of our kids that is going through treatment, and just said, "Hey, is there any way I can play golf?" And I was like, "Shoot, yes. We'll just put you in the right place." So my son and he got to play side by side, and Jeff was on that team.
Sweet.
Which was pretty emotional to watch because we do a ceremonial first shot off the first tee. So both of them got to do the tee shot. So, and what was pretty awesome was that his last chemo treatment was a week. I think it was a week. Maybe it was 3 or 4 days before the golf tournament. So it was kind of celebratory, right? Because he's beat cancer. Yeah. It was a pretty amazing event this year.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. I know. I mean, now that I'm getting to know you more, it's meaning more, but Jeff told me he was golfing with your son. I didn't know he was golfing at Corbin because Jeff spent 2 years back when it was Western Baptist. Right. We were together at Linfield for 2 years, and then he went to Western Baptist. And I think he was an All-American there as well, like Linfield. But yeah, whenever I want to win a tournament, because I'm terrible, I bring Jeff, which he probably had more fun with your son because they know how to golf. He does all the heavy lifting with us.
That was fun. I mean, I kind of get tired of hearing Jeff's name get called at every one of these golf tournaments. I hope he listens to this because
I'll make him.
But I mean, it's pretty cool to have a guy in our community that that yes was an All-American, but also believes in kind of investing into the youth, and so I know that Jeff's a guy that Braden looks up to, and so that's pretty cool that they have that connection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I only give him a hard time because I love Jeff. He's
course.
one of my guys in my circle. I hate that he's good at everything.
Man, he is.
Other than that's why I texted you and said, ask about the ping pong game in college. He stormed out of our house. He was so mad that I had beat him. He slammed the door, stormed out.
That's awesome.
So whenever I want to win an argument, I will always bring it back
Bring
to,
up ping
hey,
pong.
do you remember when we were in the sub? And that
Well, Jeff and I played softball together too, which is pretty funny because I mean, the guy played hoops, was a golfer, and would step on a softball field and was also one of the best on a softball field. And I'm like, you can't be literally good at everything you do. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It does with him.
Yeah, my dad picked him up actually softball at Wallace. I don't know, this last season. No, we'll have Jeff on here at some point. I feel like he's been ducking me a little bit too. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. What else haven't we covered? Trying to think of all the stuff we talked about out there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about.
So, I mean, you're starting HomeSmart. You just start getting off the ground. You're hit with the personal stuff. Sounds like you had great group rallying around you. I mean, years of the Dornbecker and splitting. I mean, especially your story of like you were overseas doing the military thing. I mean, you guys were really living kind of separate lives and different chapters of your life. And then all the while trying to grow a business.
Right.
Do you think that you would have the wherewithal, the stick-to-itiveness with HomeSmart if you hadn't been through what you had been through?
Right. Absolutely not. I think one of the things you and I talked about out there was over probably the last, I'd say 15 years, like between the age of probably 30 and now, right, which is now a little more than 15 years. But I think the experiences that are had are lessons, and that failure, and there's been a lot of failure, right? So I think that's one thing we talked about. Success never comes without failure. And if it does, it's false success, right? I think we can listen to, you could go to any conference and hear a motivational speaker, somebody who's been successful. Charles Barkley's a great one to listen to, right? Any of them. I mean, you've got LeBron James talks about it all the time. Dame talks about it, right? So there's failure before greatness. And how you manage, I think there's two big pieces in that statement, right? So how you manage failure and how you learn from failure determines your trajectory. How you manage your trajectory determines greatness. And so it's kind of a two-step process. It's, you have to be willing to take the risk to fail. And if you're not willing to take the risk, you're never going to really experience what failure feels like. But when you get to what failure feels like, that's when you realize, I never want this again. Right? And so I think that rolls into the, how do I manage the trajectory? Because if I realize that I failed and I can look back on it and say, okay, here's where I failed and here's the result that I got. That result doesn't feel good. Here's what I need to do differently. And now that I start to see that trajectory happen, okay, how do I manage that effectively? Do I spread that success? Do I share that success? Or do I keep it internal and just keep it for myself, if I'm keeping it for myself, you're never really going to experience the fullness of it. I don't think. I think you've got to be able to give it away. And you've got to share that experience with others. My son and I were having a conversation, and he will probably want to kick me in the shin talking about this. But, he's learning now early on what college athletics experience is like, right? So, and there's struggles and challenges, there's failures, and then there's the overcoming of said failure, right? So how do you compartmentalize, okay, I fell on my face here. I need to not focus on that, but I need to look at why that happened. And then how do I do it differently? And I need to get to a place to where I'm on the correct trajectory. And so the other day he and I were talking about it, and he was pretty bummed about a specific round that he played. And I was like, look, bro, you have to shed that. You have to look at it, but you can't hold that as truth, right? So you failed, and failure's okay. You didn't play to your potential. You need to shed that, but you need to remember what the feeling is like. And now what can you do differently? And how do I change my level of trajectory after that? And then when that happens, how do I share it with those around me? Right? And so by handling failure with grace and then looking back on how I got there, what put me in that place, and that I don't want to feel that ever again. Okay, now I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that I think are important in kind of how we run our businesses and how we do things. Because we've experienced failure in business. We've experienced failure in relationship, but we don't like the feeling of failure. So what do we do differently? And then how do we change that trajectory, and how do we share it?
Right.
Yeah.
Last thing, and this is probably the most important thing, especially for you. Talk to me about your wife.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, so her name's Kristen. I mean, she's been married to me for 23 years. I question her decision making at this point. But man, she is a rock. I mean, she's for me, she's the epitome of what faith looks like. I mean, I feel, and I know maybe now we're going to go into a realm that some people don't like, but I feel like as the man of a household, I'm going to have to answer to God for how I raise my family. I feel like I kind of got the hall pass on that because I married someone that is walking faith. So I'm like, hey, God, by my saying yes to this woman, does she kind of like, is this my golden ticket, right? The reality, no. But she's amazing. She's a wonderful mother. She's a wonderful sister, a good friend to many. And, she's the epitome of faith. And so I think that's kind of helped us get to where we're at and kind of navigate the struggles. I think she's gotten a little bit more spicy in her age. Okay. Like when she and I married, I was not afraid of confrontation. And I still am not, but I mean, she kind of shied away from it a little bit. And she didn't really want to be in that uncomfortable place. Now she's pretty spicy. Like she has no problem with confrontation. Which I think is healthy in our marriage, right? Yeah. But aside from that, I think she's just realized that she is a strong woman. Like she's survived. She's survived some things that, quite frankly, many never will, right? She's a longtime wife of a deployed military member. She's a mother of a cancer survivor. She's, a strong Christ-centered woman. She's cared for, by many. And so I think that's created this strength in her, that I would say, I don't know that she had the Christ piece when we first got married. You know, she was a strong believer, but I don't think a lot of what makes up her strength now she had 23 years ago when we got married. I think she's really grown, and it's pretty exciting. Like, I like hanging with her. I mean, she's my bestie. So I honestly cannot wait till our daughter graduates high school, and then my wife and I just get to hang.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be cool.
Yeah.
And so she's pretty amazing. Yeah. I'm really blessed to have her in my life.
It's cool to, I mean, hear you say like you guys are just buds. My wife and I, we're buds. And I think about like where I'm at now, and there's no way I could be doing what I'm doing without her. There's no way. Financially, emotionally, there's just no way. And she's my biggest cheerleader. I mean, we were joking last night when we drove out to McMinnville to hand off a hard drive for more editing stuff, my buddy Daniel, and talking about some of the cool different things that I've spoke on, some of the people I've said out there, of kind of the conversations I'm starting to have, and I just messing around. I go, hey, wonder if I become famous one day with this podcast. And she was like, well, then I'll just hang back and watch you do that, and I'll support you from the background.
Yeah.
And you know, as funny as that sounds, I've just thought about everything that's going on, and I'm like, there's no way, if I didn't have her as my partner, there's no way I could do this stuff. There's no way.
Right.
Maybe I find some success, but I don't know if I can sustain it, and I don't know if I could go where this thing's headed just on my own without that partner. And I, you know, listening to your story and all the stuff where you're away and she's mom and dad and everything, and then the trips to Dornbecker, man, she's seen a lot, been through a lot.
She's something else. I think it's a testament with like our friend group. So when we want to go out and have dinner and drinks with, you know, friends or whatever, you know, it's not uncommon for, you know, it to come up in conversation where I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm glad we got to hang out. And they're like, I didn't really come to hang out with you. We like Kristen more than you. And that is not uncommon. But I kind of dig it. Like, I like it that way, because she is exactly what you were talking about with your bride, is that, you know, anytime I'm speaking at an event, she's in the front row. She's there. Like, she's there so I can have eye contact with her. She know, you know, anytime we do like a formal event with the military, she's sitting right alongside me. And that's how it should be. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, equally yoked, and that's just how it needs to be. And thank the good Lord, that's how it is.
I recently had someone that is a big proponent of the podcast and has said some really nice things about me. But she recently said, Trav, just so you know, you realize Adrian's your secret weapon, right? Just so you understand.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's pretty money. I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting that we, you know, you have to. I often wonder, you know, okay, so when I get kind of to the end of life, right? So when I it's about that time, and I look back and I go, okay, what, you know, if I'm picturing what we see sometimes, like in a movie or whatever, when people get to go back through the clips of their life, right? And oftentimes I wonder what those are going to be. Like, what are the benchmarks? What are the things that I'm going to be able to say, one, I was a good and faithful servant. 1, 2, where did I make an impact? And then 3, who was alongside me for the ride? Mm-hmm. And what are those celebratory moments where I can look back and go, oh man, that was great. That was an amazing moment. Oh, that was hard times, but we survived that. And here's where we ended up. I think that's important to kind of, you know, think about those things and go, gosh, okay.
Yeah.
And I would argue that probably the best moments in my life have Kristen literally right beside me in them, right?
Yep.
She's part of every single one of those good moments. Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I knew we needed to end on a very strong note. And hearing everything with your family, I just thought, well, there's one key piece in all that let's hear about. And honestly, she sounds similar to Adrian, where they're fine playing the background. They're fine letting us have the microphones and the cameras and whatnot. But I think we both know it would look a whole lot different if we didn't have that support and that partner, and it's just more fun. I mean, when you start, that's one thing that I see with a lot of the success is people wanting to bring their people with them, and how lonely it would be if you just found all the success,
right,
and you weren't bringing people with you. Yeah, and how important that is to have a circle and people that will rally around you and cheer you on, or when you go through hard times,
right.
Let's all shave our heads. And yeah, just how important it is of having, some close people.
Absolutely. Very important.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming by.
Appreciate you, brother. Yeah, this was fun.
Good.